Okay, assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Can everyone hear me?
Walaikum salam.
So, Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Assalam rahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillah. Welcome everyone to our weekly Maliki Fit class. Let me go ahead and start recording. Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Can everybody hear me? Oh, that's the YouTube in the
Yes.
background. Sorry about that. Alhamdulillah. Okay. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم
صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم إني أسألك من كل خير سألك منه محمد النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم وأعوذ بك من كل شر استعاذك منه محمد النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. اللهم اغفر لنا ما قدمنا وما أخرنا وما أسررنا وما أعلنا وما أنت أعلم منا. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. اللهم إنا نعوذ بك من فتنة المحيا والممات ومن فتنة القبر ومن فتنة المسير الجهل ومن عذاب النار وسوء المصير. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد رضي الله عن أصحاب رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. يا أحمد الشيخ احضرنا بهذا المحضر وتأتي فيه بنظرة تأتينا بظفر. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد الفاتح لما أغلق والخاتم لما سبق ناصر الحق بالحق والهادي إلى صراطك المستقيم وعلى آله حق قدره ومقداره العظيم. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Welcome to our weekly Maliki Fit class. Alhamdulillah, my name is Brother Habib Rasul. I'm going to change my name here. I don't want to confuse people. I know people know me as Habib Rasul. You see the government is Rasul, but it's all the same. Alhamdulillah. Or it's all good. Today we are going to, and I'm going to share this. I have recently become very, I guess zealous is the word, about trying to make sure that we get through this book, inshallah ta'ala, in a good amount of time. And once we complete this book, I think I'm going to begin to incorporate some of the other well-known Maliki fiqh books that I've had the opportunity to study in our rotation. So like Akhdari and Ibn Ashur and things like that. But I want to make sure we have the lessons from this book as a firm foundation. You'll find that once you've gone through this book, that much of the information in those other books that you may have heard of becomes, easy, and you'll actually have more detail, right? So inshallah ta'ala, we're going to start. But because we are in the section that deals with tahara, that deals with wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah, Haj Dawood, welcome. Alhamdulillah, jazakallah khair. So good to see you here with us. As was the habit of Sheikh Amin often, you all know I like to start with a hadith. And I just opened up this book here. It's called Kitab al-Adhkar, or the Book of Remembrances. It's a collection of hadith from Imam Nawawi, rahmatullahi. Imam Nawawi is one of those scholars whose books of hadith I would say we can encourage each other to read regularly. You know, some of the other books of hadith, you know, Sahih Bukhari, Sahih Muslim, you know, we should read those too. But you'll find sometimes they have a hadith in them that are hard to put into action if you don't have a firm foundation of knowledge. You may in your own travels have come across people who maybe take a hadith and they don't know the context, or they don't know the other hadith that you know help to flesh out one's understanding of that hadith or how to put it in practice. And it may take this one hadith and run with it in a way that actually goes against the spirit of what the sunnah of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam communicates with regard to a given issue, right? But in Imam Nawawi's books, like the 40 hadith of Imam Nawawi, Riyadh al-Salihin, Kitab al-Adhkar, these are books that, it is good and beneficial for us to just read. Obviously, just reading by yourself, reading by ourselves doesn't make us experts or scholars on the subject, but we can benefit from them. And this is one of the things that our teachers encourage. Yes, we follow a madhab. Yes, we follow a school of thought. Yes, we follow well-established rulings on things, but we also want to develop our own relationship with the tradition, with the Quran, of course, first and foremost, and with the hadith and with the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We want to develop our own relationship with this tradition and with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So with that being said, I'm going to start by reading this hadith. So this is a hadith that is attributed to so I'm going to read this whole section. This is from the beginning of the 16th section of Kitab al-Adhkar regarding what to say during wudu. We just discussed wudu. Now we're going into ghusl, but what to say during wudu. And so he opens up, Imam Nawawi rahmatullahi alayhi says, it is mustahab to say in the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, at the beginning, meaning when you first start your wudu. It is sufficient to say Bismillah, in the name of Allah. Our colleagues, he says, and here in parentheses, they let us know he's talking about Imam Shafi, rahmatullahi, because Imam Nawawi followed the approach of Imam Shafi, rahmatullahi. Imam Shafi holds that if one leaves out the name of Allah at the beginning of wudu, one should say it during it. And if one has still not said it when one has finished, then one should not say it because one has neglected the proper place for it. But the wudu would still be valid. So in other words, Imam Nawawi shares that Imam Shafi said that you should say Bismillah or Bismillah Rahman Rahim at the beginning of your wudu, and that if you forget to say it, then you say it during the wudu. But if you forget to say it and you don't remember until after you've already completed your wudu, then you don't say it and your wudu is still valid. But you missed out on that sunnah of saying it to begin your wudu. He says this applies whether one leaves it out intentionally or out of forgetfulness. That is our view, and that is the view of the majority of scholars. Weak ahadith have been reported about saying the name of Allah in wudu. Ahmad ibn Hanbal rahmatullahi said, I do not know of any established hadith about mentioning the name of Allah in wudu. Among those weak hadith is the following, and even though this is a weak hadith, we're still going to read it because, and this is one of the reasons I'm reading this is because, we sometimes have the thought that if a hadith is weak, that we just don't do anything with it, but that's not the opinion of the scholars, right? Weak hadith still have a place. Weak is not the same as fabricated, right? And so if the weak hadith is calling us to something that is not controversial and that is a good action, we can still utilize it, right? If the weak hadith has stronger hadith that give us a picture different than what the weak hadith gives, then we go with the stronger hadith. But there's barakah in us reviewing even the weak hadith, and sometimes the weak hadith is made stronger by other corroborating hadith. So the hadith I'm going to read here, and then we'll start the lesson. Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu reported that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "There is no wudu for anyone who has not mentioned the name of Allah over it." Abu Dawood and others narrated. We relate this from the narration of Sa'id ibn Zayd, Abu Sa'id, Aisha, Anas ibn Malik, and Sahal ibn Sa'ad radiallahu anhum. We relate them all from the Sunnah of Al-Bayhaqi as well as others. Al-Bayhaqi and others consider them all to be da'if, weak. So again, practically speaking, we've read a hadith for the barakah, but practically speaking, what you need to know is that it is mustahab. It is good to begin your wudu by saying Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim or Bismillah. Some say Bismillah Rahman Rahim, some say Bismillah. Both are acceptable among the scholars. So in the beginning of your wudu, you say Bismillah or Bismillah Rahman Rahim. And if you forgot to do it, then you can say it when you remember in the middle of your wudu, Bismillah, Bismillah Rahman Rahim. But if you are doing wudu in the bathroom, if you're doing wudu in the area where people relieve themselves, where there's a toilet, then you don't say it audibly. You don't say it on your tongue. You simply say it in your heart, in your mind, inwardly. You say Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Not even a whisper, but just in your mind, in your heart, you say Bismillah or Bismillahirrahmanirrahim when you start the wudu. And if you're making the wudu somewhere where there's no toilet, like you outside and you got a bottle of water, or you're in a masjid maybe that has a wudu station with no toilet in it. I love those because then you can follow the sunnah of saying Bismillah Rahman Rahim, and not have to worry about saying it in the bathroom. But we don't say it when we are in the bathroom. I started to read from the other section that talks about Imam Nawawi mentioned some of the hadith that demonstrate why we don't say adhkar in the bathroom, but I'll leave that for another time. Brother Dawood, do you have your hand up? You have a question?
Yes, yes. In the bathrooms in some of the newer homes, they have partition for the toilet. Does that also mean the fact that you don't say it out loud? You just say it in your heart?
You're asking, should you still say it in your heart if there's a partition?
Yeah, it was a petition.
I don't know. That's a good question. I would have to see it. And even then I might not know. I don't know. That I would have to ask one of my teachers, based on the setup, whether or not that holds. I mean, is it a situation? Oh, did we lose? Oh, no, he's back. We lost you for a second. Is it a situation where the bathroom is like closed off, or it's the same room, but there's just something between the wash area and the toilet? Brother Dawood, can you hear me? Assalamu alaikum, can you hear me? We might have lost him. Okay, mashallah. Inshallah, we get him back. Brother Dawood, I don't know if you can hear me, but we lost you for a second. If you come back, let us know, inshallah ta'ala, because I'll ask you a follow-up question. I'm wondering whether or not that partition closes the toilet area off, or whether or not it just puts a barrier between you and the toilet. So if you're able to respond, inshallah, please let me know. I would say if it closes the area off, then yes, you could say Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim or Bismillah out loud. But if it's just a barrier between you and the toilet, then I would still leave it off to be safe. But Allahu alam. Inshallah, let me know if you get back to where you can communicate with us, inshallah ta'ala. We are going to jump into the lesson for today on ghusl. And I believe we ended off in our last class with the actual directions of how to make ghusl. And inshallah ta'ala, we're going to pick up today with discussion. That is my wife calling, so let me text her to let me know I'm in class to see if it's something urgent. Inshallah. Sorry about that. Alhamdulillah. So we are going to pick up this week with the section that talks about the reasons for ghusl. The reasons for ghusl, inshallah ta'ala. We just had someone join us, so alhamdulillah. Assalamu alaikum, Sister Grizel. Alhamdulillah. Great to have you in the class. Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. So we're jumping in, and you're right on time because we just are starting the actual lesson from the book. We just read some hadith to start with, but we are talking about the reasons for ghusl. Reasons for ghusl. Last class we left off talking about how to make the ghusl, and now we're picking up on the reasons for the ghusl. So the first reason it gives is seminal emission. Seminal emission. What is seminal emission? This is talking about when an adult person, ejaculates, right? And that can be for men or women. This necessitates a ghusl. In other words, this means that a person has to take a ghusl, the major ablution, where water submerges or touches their whole body, right, before they can pray. The second that they mention is when the private part of the man is inserted into the private part of the woman, right? So obviously this should just be for married couples, married men and women, right? In any other situation, this would be haram. But whether it's the right situation of a husband and wife or something haram, in any case, once the private part of the man is inserted into the private part of the woman, they have to take a ghusl, even if it's just a small amount, right? They both have to take a ghusl, the man and the woman. They would both be entered into a state of janaba, where they need to take a ghusl before they can pray. The third is when a woman has her cycle, has what they call her menstruation, her menstrual cycle, when it commences. And it says in the text, even if it's one drop or even if it's a small amount. And they say if there is some bleeding from the woman that occurs after her normal cycle, right? Meaning her normal cycle maybe normally lasts maybe 6 or 7 days, just as a example. If her if she continues to have blood coming after that period, she waits for 3 days, right? She waits for 3 days, according to the opinion that we're following here. There's some different opinions out there, but she waits for 3 days. If there's still blood after that, she should wait another 3 days, right? If there's still bleeding after that, it is considered a sickness, right? It's considered a sickness. It's considered they use the word sickness, but perhaps a better way to put it would be it's considered abnormal, right? It's considered to be some kind of medical condition, some kind of abnormality. In which case, the way they say in the book, she should shave away the hair that's there where blood may have collected, and she should take a ghusl, and then she can continue to pray, right? She can continue to pray. Some of the books even say if the woman wants, she can put some kind of fragrance there or something like that. She has the right to do any of those kinds of things. And I know the sisters, they have things that they do as a part of their grooming and whatnot in the process. So it's just kind of alluding to that. But in essence, it's saying that if when a woman starts her menstrual cycle, when she finishes it, she has to take a ghusl before she can pray, right? Unless she has waited the requisite amount of time after her cycle would normally be over, then if there's still blood, it's considered an abnormality or a medical condition, and she should make a ghusl and she should pray. And then the next point it gives here in my notes is listed as a fourth point, but it's really just a description of the third point, an elaboration on the third point. It says if a woman's cycle is a 3-day cycle, right? That's where you would wait 3 days. That's where you would wait 3 days. But if her cycle is 5 days, then the wait is 5 days, or whatever her cycle is. The waiting period is that long. So, putting that point along with the previous point, what it's saying is that when the woman has her menstrual period, whatever the menstrual period, so I misspoke when I gave the example of 6 or 7 days, because then it would be 6 or 7 days. So, when a woman has a menstrual cycle, let's say her menstrual cycle is normally 6 days, right? After 6 days have finished, if her menses continues and blood is still coming, right, then she should wait another 6 days. If in the course of those 6 days the blood stops, she takes a ghusl and prays. If 6 days is finished and she still continues, right, to have bleeding, then she waits another 6 days. And if the 6 days continues after that, then she should stop, make a ghusl, and begin to pray, because this is considered a medical condition. And we're going to come back to this in another section where it's going to give a little bit more detail. But this is where it introduces this point, that the woman, if she has a menstrual cycle and it lasts longer than normal, she takes the length of time that her menstrual cycle normally lasts. Let's say it's 6 or 7 days, right? After the 7th day, she still sees blood. Then she should wait another 7 days, right? And if the blood stops at that point, she stops and makes a ghusl. And if it continues after that, she'll wait another 7 days. And after that, if there's still blood, she takes a ghusl and prays. And she should go to the doctor and find out why there's this medical condition where she still is bleeding after her cycle has stopped. The next point they make, and I'm going to say this is 4, right? Because the last 2 points I made are really should be combined. So I'm going to say this is the 4th reason for ghusl, is the birth of a child. The birth of a child. So this is something that we call in English, we say afterbirth, right? Afterbirth, where after a woman gives birth, there's still some discharge. There's still some blood that will come for a time. So she waits until that blood stops flowing, and then she makes a ghusl and prays, right? Let's say there's a childbirth. Sometimes this happens when if there's unfortunately a complication where there's a what's the word, a miscarriage or something like this. You may have a child that's born where there's no blood, right? Even still, she should make a ghusl before she prays. She should make a ghusl before she returns to the prayer. The 5th point, or the 5th example, when a person wakes up and finds seminal emission on their clothes. So this is something that I know this is not stuff that I said this last week too, or last class. These are not the kind of things we would normally just talk about, right? Perhaps in mixed company, but this is the fiqh. And so it's important that the Prophet ﷺ said we shouldn't let shyness prevent us from learning what we need to know about our religion. So a person may go to sleep and they may have what they call in the vernacular a wet dream, right? Or a nocturnal emission, where they may have an orgasm or ejaculation while they're asleep. If they wake up and they find evidence of this on their clothing, right, or in their bed or what have you, then they need to make a ghusl before they can pray, right? They need to make a ghusl before they can pray. The next point they mention, they say if there is some doubt when you wake up about whether the fluid or the discharge that you see is madhi or mani, right? And I'll explain what those are in a minute. You should treat it as mani. So let me say it in English. If you have doubt, if you wake up and you find on your clothing something and you're not sure whether it's what they call madhi, which is pre-ejaculatory fluid. When a person gets aroused, right, they may have some fluid that comes from the men and the women, right? And this is especially, the fiqh talks about this even more so for the men, right? So if a person sees this fluid and they're not sure if it's pre-ejaculatory fluid or if it's semen, right? If it's ejaculatory fluid, which in Arabic we call mani', if you're not sure which one it is, then you treat it as mani'. You treat it as semen to be safe, and you have to take a ghusl before you can pray, right? And we'll say that's the 6th situation, right? The 7th. So if you're keeping record the same way I am in my book, the 5th would be when a person has a nocturnal emission, and the 7th would be if they're not sure whether it was semen or pre-ejaculatory fluid that came in their dream. That would be the 6th. And so the 7th is if a person's state of mind changes due to the use of an intoxicant. And this is reality. We know Muslims who, inshallah, are sincere Muslims who have struggles with addiction, who have struggles with substance abuse, right? Whether it's alcohol, marijuana, or something else, right? And we pray, anybody that we know who's like that, we pray that Allah liberate them from that sickness, liberate them from that struggle, and bless them not to have that problem and to stop doing this haram action. But if their state of mind changes by use of an intoxicant before they can pray, they got to go make a ghusl. And this also counts for things that are lawful, like different medications. There are situations where a person may have to take a medication that puts them in a sort of intoxicated state of mind, right? And when they have to do this and there's no alternative, right, and they have to do this for medical reasons, they're forgiven for that, right? But you should try to find an alternative. Usually, you can find an alternative unless it's a very very heavy sort of extreme kind of situation, right? And so if a person's in that situation and they take some kind of medicine that intoxicates them, befogs their mind, is the way some people translate the Arabic. Like their mind becomes covered, is how it says in the Quran, right? If someone is in this state, when they come back into their right mind, they should make a ghusl and pray. right? They should make a ghusl and pray, and they should make up any prayers that they missed while they were in that state, right? So, and this is actually a good prescription if you encounter any Muslim who's struggling with these kind of problems, like if you know Muslims who have problems with alcoholism or smoking weed or anything like that, one of the things that you can remind them of is that, well, before they can pray, they have to take a ghusl, right? And I've seen, alhamdulillah, I've seen this help people to where, at first they feel that they can't kick the addiction, but they have enough iman and sincerity that they want to still try to make their prayers and keep their prayers in an acceptable condition. So then every time they find themselves in that state of intoxication, they got to go make a ghusl when they come to. And they got to make a ghusl, which, the nafs may not like having to go make a ghusl, right? The nafs is like your desires, the Arabic word that means self, but it also means like the part of yourself that desires things, that wants things for itself, right? Rather than for the pleasure of Allah Ta'ala, right? So the nafs may not want to take a ghusl. And then on top of that, any prayers that they missed when they were in an intoxicated state, they got to make up. So knowing this can help them sort of wean themselves off of this substance abuse, right? Because now they have to go through the work of taking a ghusl and making up those prayers, right? So if a person is in a state like that, where their state of mind changes due to an intoxicant, they have to make a ghusl before they can pray. And this is talking about like things that intoxicate a person. It's not like somebody might take a Tylenol or Benadryl or something like that. It may have some effect, but that's not a strong enough effect for us to count that as being an intoxicant, right? But yeah, but inshallah, hopefully people understand, and if not, we will have time for some question and answers after the section. The next, this would be the eighth example, or the eighth case. They say if a person breaks wudu while they're in ghusl, or they have to urinate while they're making ghusl, then they should go back and make wudu again, then come back to the ghusl and complete the ghusl from where they left off. So this is mentioned in the section of reasons for ghusl, but technically this is more of a clarification of what to do if you're making the ghusl and you break wind, or while you're making a ghusl, you have to go to the bathroom. What do you do in that situation? Because as we learned in our previous class, one aspect of the ghusl, of the sunnah of the ghusl, is to make a wudu, right, as a part of your ghusl, right? And if people need a refresher, we can talk about how you do that or when you do that, inshallah ta'ala. But as a part of your ghusl, usually at the beginning of the ghusl, after you clean your private part, you cover your private part and you make a wudu. And then you take the covering off, the towel or what have you, and then you make a ghusl, right? But what happens if you do something that breaks the wudu while you're in the middle of a ghusl? Well, you stop, you do what you got to do. If you have to use the restroom, urinate or something like that, or after you've broken wind, you renew your wudu. You make a new wudu for ghusl, right? The wudu that's attached to the ghusl or part of the ghusl. And then you return to your ghusl from where you left off. You don't have to start from the beginning. So I made my wudu for ghusl. I started ghusl. I cleaned the right side of my body. I'm about to clean the left side of my body, and suddenly I have to use the restroom. Stop, use the restroom. I make a new wudu. And as we talked about in the past, you can do a wudu with just one wiping of each part when it's a wudu for ghusl. And then I go complete my ghusl and wash the left side of my body, and now my ghusl is complete. I don't have to go back and redo what I did before I made the wudu. And then the last point they make in this chapter, in this section of reasons for ghusl, they say if you have doubt about a part of your body being washed, you should go back and wash it, unless this doubt comes every day. You should ignore it if it comes every day, because then we think it may come from the shaitan, a'udhu billah. And this is an important point that we're going to come back to again and again and again. How do you deal with doubt? Shak. How do you deal with when you have doubt? Maybe you have doubt about the correctness of your wudu, or doubt about your salah, how many rak'ah you made, or doubt about your ghusl. If this doubt comes occasionally, you address the doubt. In the case of the ghusl, if you're making ghusl and at the end of the ghusl you don't remember whether or not you cleaned your left arm, well, go back and clean your left arm. So that you don't have any doubt. You go back and wash your left arm, and you don't have to redo the entire ghusl. You just do that part that you had doubt about. But if doubt comes to you all the time, like once a day or more, if once a day or more you're having doubt about your ghusl or your wudu or your salah, then you ignore the doubt. You ignore the doubt. Why? Because oftentimes we can become obsessive about things where we're always wondering, do I have wudu? Did I wash that? Did I wash my arm in the ghusl? Did I make 4 rakah or 3 rakah? And this is a trick of the shaitan, a'udhu billah, to make the prayer and the wudu and the other forms of ibadah cumbersome, to make them cumbersome, such that we may actually stop engaging in the act of ibadah, right? I've heard stories of people who always had doubt about how many rak'ah they made in their prayer, and it got to be so overwhelming they stopped praying. A'udhu billah, right? But even if it doesn't become that extreme, it may just cause a level of anxiety that removes us from being able to really taste the sweetness of our ibadah. So when the doubt comes often, we ignore it, right? And in the case of a ghusl, you may not theoretically make a ghusl, a full ghusl, every day. Even if you take a shower every day with soap, you may not take the. And Dr. Dunya, Sheikh Amin, I remember I asked Sheikh Amin, what about the person who takes a shower but doesn't make a ghusl? He said, what Dr. Dunya opinion was, why would you use that much water to clean yourself in a shower without making the niyyah to make a ghusl as a part of it, right? So he would always, if he was going to take a shower, he'd take a ghusl, right? But in any case, if a person takes a shower but doesn't take a ghusl every day, right? If a person doesn't take a ghusl every day, it's not mandated that you take a daily ghusl. If you haven't entered into a state of janaba where you have to take a ghusl to pray, right? But if every time you take a ghusl, right, you find yourself having doubt about whether or not you washed a part of your body, I would say in that state, you take the same principle to start to ignore the doubt, right? You can wash that part that you have doubt about just to get the doubt out of your mind. But know that if the doubt is coming regularly like that, then it's probably a kind of anxiety, or what in the books of fiqh they'll refer to as a waswas, as a whisper of the shaitan. So we want to ignore it, because eventually if we ignore it, it'll stop coming back, inshallah. I'm going to pause there to see if anybody has any questions about any of those points before we move on to the next section, inshallah ta'ala. Any questions?
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. How you doing?
Alhamdulillah. About the towel. Now, I don't understand that part. When you're making the ghusl, why do you need the towel?
Yes, that's a great question. So I'm going to go back and do a quick review. So, what is the fard of the ghusl? According to most of the Maliki books and scholars, the fard, the obligatory parts of the ghusl, is one, to have the intention to make ghusl. You can't say, oh, I happened to get my body all wet, so I made a ghusl. No, you have to start with the intention that I'm making ghusl, right? Mm-hmm. Then after the intention, the next fard is that water touch your whole body, that your body becomes sort of submerged in water, right? Water has to touch your whole body to have a ghusl, right? And most of the other madhahib, they leave the fards at that. Like if you say, I make intention to make ghusl, then you step in the shower, right? Or you step into some body of water, right? Like back in the day when people have to sometimes, and even some places today, people might have to take a ghusl in the river or something like that, right? But if you have the intention and the body and the water touches your whole body, you fulfilled the fard of the ghusl, according to most of the madhahib. The Malikis say you should also rub. So it's not enough for water to just touch your whole body. You have to also rub each part of your body. And that rubbing can be with your hand. It can be you rub your arm with your arm, or your leg with your foot, another part of the body to rub that part of the body. Or it can be with something like a washcloth or a loofah or anything like that, right? But you have to rub your whole body. Now, Dr. Dunya and Sheikh Amin, rahmatullahi, and may Allah preserve Sheikh Amin, they were of the opinion that they treated the wiping like a strong sunnah, like a sunnah mu'akkada, because their position was, if all the other madhahib say that your wudu your ghusl is valid just by the intention and water touching your body, then we're going to say that that's valid. And so some of the Malikis will say the ghusl is not valid if you don't rub or wipe every part of your body as a part of the ghusl. But Dr. Dunya and Sheikh Amin, they were a little more lenient. They said the ghusl would be valid, but it's better following the madhab, the approach of Imam Malik rahmatullahi, to make sure you rub every part of your body. Now that's the fard. But what's the sunnah of the ghusl? As part of the sunnah of the ghusl, you start by cleaning your private part, right? Why do you start by cleaning your private part? Because the next part of the sunnah of the ghusl is to make a wudu. So one of the sunnahs of the ghusl is to make a wudu as part of your ghusl. And we know that after you make a wudu, if you touch your private part, your wudu is broken. Now that's a bigger issue for men, because for women, if you touch the outside of the private part, it doesn't break the ghusl, right? But for men, if you touch any part of the private part with the front of your hand or the sides of your fingers, right, it breaks the wudu, right? So it's a sunnah to make wudu for ghusl, and it is good to clean your private part first before you make the wudu for ghusl, so that you don't have to touch your private part again, right, in the ghusl. You follow what I'm saying? It's also a sunnah, generally speaking, to cover your private parts when you make a wudu, right? It's and actually some of the indications from the Sahaba give us the impression that it's makruh to make wudu with your private part uncovered. So, in the bathroom, a person may be in the nude making wudu. It's not haram. The wudu's valid, but it's considered makruh. It's better etiquette to make sure you cover your private part when you make the wudu. And so when we put all that together, we find the mechanics of the ghusl is that the sunnah is to clean your private part first, then cover your private part with whatever you choose to cover it. A towel is a convenient thing to cover it with if you're in a modern shower and bathroom situation, and then make the wudu, wiping the parts of your wudu just one time, right? You don't have to do 3, do just 1. Then you take the covering off and you proceed to complete your ghusl by letting water touch the rest of your body. Does that make sense?
It makes sense.
Hold on. Let me
Okay,
let me
I'm trying to understand how it makes sense. Still, I don't. Okay, you do the private part first. I got that. For women, it's a little different because we have an internal,
right,
situation.
Right.
So we're gonna use a shower head or whatever to try to get water in that area. The device, and then after we've completed that, we're gonna go ahead and start the wudu. I mean, the regular wudu. So that's finished. We're not touching that area. Then we're gonna go on to, after we finish the wudu, to do the right side of the body, left side of the body, right?
That's right. So the towel, you're still wondering where the towel comes in. So when you made the wudu, it is sunnah to cover your private part while you're making the wudu.
Okay, it's just sunnah. It doesn't have to make any sense. Okay, it doesn't have to read. I mean, I don't see anything logical about it, but okay.
Okay, Brother Dawood had a point. Yes.
I'm glad somebody brought that up, because I know I had missed the class, so I didn't want to bring it up now. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm trying to wrap myself around that too, because if I'm in the shower quite naturally. Yes, I'm going to wash my private part, private part first. But I'm in the shower getting ready to make ghusl. How do you cover your private part?
So I'm gonna say this, and I want both of you to let me know if this helps it click. So 2 things. One, know that this practice predates our modern shower. So the people used to make the shower during the time of the Prophet out of a bucket, not out of the shower head. So that's one.
Gotcha.
Right. So, and then now, number 2, how do we apply this same methodology when we use the shower head? We turn the shower off when we cover our private part and make the wudu. And then once we make the wudu and we get ready to complete our ghusl, we turn the shower back on.
That's still, yeah, that's a lot of parts to that. However, what about just go ahead and make your ghusl and then get out the shower and then make wudu?
You can do that. You can do that. That is permissible. That is permissible. What I just laid out is the strongest way to do it according to the sunnah, right? And again, keep in mind that the people were doing this before they had the shower head, right?
Okay.
Another thing that you can do for the married people, right? You or even we're adults, so even if a person has like a nocturnal emission, something like that, right? You can clean your private part, right? Like the hadith tell us that the Prophet ﷺ, when he would have relations with his wife, when he would finish, he would clean his private part, and then he would make a wudu. So you could clean your private part, cover your private part, make a wudu, and then go back to sleep. And then when you get up, you can proceed to make the rest of your ghusl. This is also permissible.
Mashallah.
Right.
Mashallah. Subhanallah.
Sister, does that clear it up for you as well?
Yeah, sure. That's what I'm gonna do.
well,
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 what I'm saying to do is clear, correct?
Yes.
yes,
Okay. The thing that's unclear is it just seems a little illogical because we're not used to taking a shower like that, correct?
correct.
Right.
And cover
You have all this-
and cover your private parts while the shower is running. That's like, how do you do that?
Right. So I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that because you're wasting water. If you're covering with a
Right.
towel, you're getting the towel wet. There's no reason to do that, right?
Exactly.
You would turn the
Okay.
shower off. And I want to make it clear that if you didn't cover your private part during the ghusl, or you chose to make the wudu, it's good to make the wudu in the beginning of the ghusl. But even if you made it at the end, it wouldn't invalidate your ghusl. It wouldn't invalidate your ghusl, right? I remember when we took this lesson from Sheikh Amin, I had a lot of the same questions. So y'all are kind of making me remember, bringing me back, right? And Sheikh Amin was alhamdulillah, and Brother Hajj Dawood is jumping back on, and I'm glad because he's somebody who's taking this information. Assalamu alaikum, Hajj Dawood. You back? Can you hear me? Oh, he might have to be on mute.
Walaikum salam. I'm here. I just have it on two different devices. That's all. I never left.
Okay, no problem. Maybe you can help me with answering some of these questions too. And for anybody who doesn't know, Hajj Dawood is also a student of Sheikh Amin, who also has ijazah to teach and who has been studying and teaching this information longer than me, right? Both with Sheikh Dawood and both with Sheikh Amin and even before Sheikh Amin. So one of the reasons I love it when he's in the class is because he can help me out and back me up. I try not to lean on him too much because I don't want him to, what I mean, feel burdened. But he's always someone who I love to chime in and help me out. So I remember when I took this information from Sheikh Amin, I was like, what? Because this wasn't how I approached taking a shower, right? But this is, Sheikh Amin used to be very clear that this is the sunnah of how you should do it, and so you should push yourself to conform to do it this way. However, I also want to make it clear that if you're not doing it this way, as long as you have all of the pieces that need to happen in place, your ghusl is valid. But I want to encourage all of us to work to get to the place where we're doing it according to the sunnah as best as possible to get all of the benefit that comes with that. Is that clear?
I mean,
Yes, you put it very well, Dr. Habib. I remember. You can hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I remember talking about the Sahabas used to try to imitate the Prophet in everything he did and every way he did it so that they could receive the most rewards for this. Like he used to love to eat grapes and he loved to eat watermelon. But one of the Sahabas didn't know how he ate the watermelon, so he wouldn't even eat the watermelon just to try to just to try to, duplicate exactly how he did it. Um, we was taught in class that the ghusl is if you just cover your whole body through water, that's a ghusl. But we want to do it to have Allah as pleased with us as and more pleased with us as he possibly can. And that's why we do all these extra things. But both with the brother and the sister is right, and just probably the way they've been doing it, but we want to try to get as many rewards as we can.
I mean.
Jazakumullah khair. Thank you so much, Haj Dawood. That you put the perfect period on it. Alhamdulillah. Jazakumullah khair.
Well, I'm
And
glad.
I wanna say again.
No, I'm saying I'm glad I don't have no cameras in my house. You used to see me trying to get this thing done. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah that the only one who sees us always is Allah. Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. And I part of me wants to riff on what Haj Dawood said a little bit about some of the different accounts of how the Sahaba would do certain things. I'll give one example for time's sake. There's a story of one of the Sahabas. He had, I don't know if you can see this water bottle, but imagine this is a cup. He had a cup here, and they say he just took the cup and he moved it and put it here. When someone asked, why'd you do that? He said, one time I saw the Prophet ﷺ do that. So I wanted to get the blessing of doing what I saw him do. So I did it. and this is about love, right? This is about love. It's we have stages of inshallah, Allah blesses us to grow in our iman. Sometimes when we first, and even me, I was raised a Muslim, right? But whether you born into the deen or you accepted the deen later, once you're a conscious, aware person, you may have a stage where you say, okay, I love this Islam because it makes so much sense, right? And then you may see people who do stuff and it's not really motivated by logic, right? It's motivated by the Prophet says I did it, so I'm gonna do it, right? But then inshallah, as you grow, you realize that's a part of it too. Is having that level of love to say, I want to emulate the Prophet Islam. And there's many cases where it's very clear why it's 100% logical to do this thing that we find in the Sunnah of the Prophet Sallallahu. And then there's other aspects of the deen that go beyond our logic. I'm not saying anything is illogical, but it's beyond our logic. Like why we pray 5 times a day and not 6 or not 7? Why do you make Maghrib with 3 rak'ah and not 4 or 5, right? There's a tradition from Imam Ali, Karamallah Wajh, radiallahu ta'ala, where he said, if the deen was taken from our aql, from our intellect, then when I wipe over my shoe to make wudu, and we know there's times when you can wipe over your shoe, I would wipe the bottom of my foot, because that's the part of your shoe that steps in dirty things, right? But because it's not based on simply logic, but it's not based on simply aql, but naql, meaning traditions that we receive from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and for us from those who followed the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you wipe over the top of your shoe in the wudu when you wipe over your shoe. And many of you have probably seen when a person makes what they call masha, if they have a khuf, or some do it over the shoes, some even do it over socks, depending on what opinion you follow. They'll wipe over the top of their shoe or their sock. Imam Malik rahmatullahi used to do both. He would take, and hopefully I'm limber enough to bring my foot up on the camera, but he would take his hands and he would do like this, if you can see. The right hand over the top of his foot and the left hand over the bottom of his foot, right? Because we follow the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ based on what we receive, the naql, but we also use our aql, right? And also use our logic. But, we do what the Prophet ﷺ did to the best of our ability out of love for the Prophet ﷺ, and fidelity and sincerity and knowing his way is the best way, whether we understand it yet or not. Right, so inshallah, I'll proceed. That's a subject we could talk about for days, right? Just loving the Prophet ﷺ and following his example. May Allah bless us to be among those who he writes and record as those who love the Prophet ﷺ and follow his example, right? To a degree that he's pleased with. So now we're gonna I'll go a little bit after 4 o'clock because I want to make sure I get through another page, just because I want to keep us on a good pace so we can get through the book, inshallah ta'ala. But I'm not going to go very long after 4 o'clock. So if you have to go, if you can hold an extra 5 minutes or so, 5 or 10 minutes after I'm saying 4 my time. I think it's 6 for y'all on the East Coast. Then inshallah we'll close out very soon. But we're gonna quickly go through the mustahabat, the mustahabs of ghusl. What is mustahab? Anybody who remembers, what does it mean when we say something is mustahab?
Highly recommended.
Highly recommended. Alhamdulillah, highly recommended. So we have the fard, which is obligatory, and we have the mustahab, which is recommended, meaning if something's fard, if we leave it off, then we did a sin, and there's a punishment that we may face for that, right? But if something's a mustahab, that means we're rewarded for doing it, but we're not punished for not doing it. So these are all things that are mustahab, that are mustahabat, that is recommended, is pleasing to Allah, inshallah, if we do them. But if a person misses them, it doesn't invalidate their ghusl. Their ghusl is still valid. So they mentioned one. Generally, what is mustahab for wudu is mustahab for ghusl. So we went through the section of the mustahabat for wudu. All of that applies to the ghusl too, right? So things like, saying Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim to start, or saying it in your heart if you're taking a shower in a place where the toilet is in the same vicinity. And all the various things that were mustahab for the ghusl, right? Then it goes on to mention some specific ones. So the second one it mentions is you should have a clean area. You should have a clean area. It's mustahab. It's desirable to try to make sure it's where you make a ghusl is a clean place, right? Person may be in a situation where they have to, out of necessity, make a ghusl in a place that's not so clean, right? But if you're not forced by necessity, try to make sure you make a ghusl in a clean place. 3, they mentioned, if you can, you should face the qibla when you make a ghusl, right? If you can. It's not always, they don't build houses here based on making sure that you're not, when you go to the bathroom, you're neither facing the qibla nor is your back to the qibla. When you're in the ghusl, is it convenient for you to face the qibla when you're making a ghusl? But if you can face the qibla, it's a mustahab to face the qibla, face Mecca while you're making a ghusl, while you're doing this act of worship. 4th, they mentioned is you should say Bismillah, right? We already talked about that, audibly if you're not by the toilet. Someone said, what was number 1? Number 1 is generally whatever is mustahab for wudu is also mustahab for ghusl, right? So it starts by giving us that general prescription. All the things that we covered in the section of the mustahabat for wudu are also mustahab for ghusl, right? And even the things that they're listing here are things that all we covered in the section of the mustahabat for wudu. But it still starts by telling you that general prescription, and then it gives you some specifics. So number 1, generally whatever is mustahab for wudu is also mustahab for ghusl. Number 2, you should have a clean area. Number 3, you should face the qibla while you're making ghusl if you can. Number 4, you should say Bismillah. Number 5, you should use a small amount of water. You don't want to waste water. So, and I put myself, say use yourself as a bad example before you put it on somebody else. I know me, I sometimes have the bad habit of taking too long to make a wudu or take a ghusl, right? So if you're like me, we got to work to make sure we don't take an extra long ghusl because we don't want to waste water, right? So you don't want to use too much water. That's another reason why it's blessing in using, the shower out the pot. But realistically speaking, I know we have the shower and it's more convenient to use the shower. So try just not to keep it on any longer than you need. Yes, Sidi Dawood.
I always got a question that I brought that up with someone. I say, we in the 21st century, our water is not wasted so much as it was years and years ago because we have a drainage system and the water is being recycled. Is that still considered wasting water?
SubhanAllah, I don't know. I've never thought about that. I know that all my teachers were of the opinion that, when you make the wudu, don't turn the faucet on to the highest extent. Just use a small amount. Don't stay in the ghusl longer than you have to. So I've never really thought about it from the standpoint of the water being recycled. So, Allahu Alam, that.
The reason why I asked that question, because that was one of the things I noticed that, when I'm in Africa or even here, and I meet brothers that they waste a lot of water.
Right.
A lot of water is being wasted. And I was like, this is not good, because if there's water shortage, you're going to wish you had that water. So I was just curious.
That's exactly what I was about to say. Even if maybe that's an exception, you still should be in the habit of using as little water as possible, because your habits, one, because again, we follow in the sunnah of the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? And he didn't use, and two, if we're in a situation where all we have is a little bit of water, right? We want to be able to know how to use a small amount of water. So I would say still it's makruh to use more water than you need to, right? So it mentions here if a person, these are some more mustahabat of the ghusl, or is listed in the section of mustahabat during ghusl. If a person breaks their wudu in the course of their ghusl, meaning you're making ghusl and you break wind, you pass gas, or you have to go to use the restroom, you should make a new intention for the new wudu. So it's good if when you go to make a new wudu for ghusl, right? You renew your wudu in the process of your ghusl, and after you renew that wudu, you do whatever you have not yet done for your ghusl. It's good to also make it a point to make a separate intention for this new wudu, right? But if you just had it in your heart, I'm just making my wudu for ghusl again, that's sufficient. It also mentions it's that you should make the intention for the sunnah wiping before washing the hands. This you should do in your mind only. You should make a niyyah for the fard of the ghusl before washing away khabath. So this is something we find in the book. It mentions it's good, it's mustahab if you make the intention to do a sunnah when you're doing a sunnah and a fard when you're doing a fard. So for instance, when you start your wudu, you make your intention to make wudu. But the first parts of the wudu are sunnah. The first fard of the wudu is when you wash your face. So it's good if you have the presence of mind to say, okay, now I'm making my intention to begin the fard, the fara'id of the wudu, right? But it's mustahab, right? Same with the ghusl. It's considered mustahab if when you start the ghusl by washing your hands, you start with the intention of you're doing the sunnah for ghusl. When you make your wudu, you have the intention you're doing the sunnah for ghusl. But when you start to wash away the impurity, like when you clean your private part, right? That you recognize, okay, now I'm beginning the fard part of the ghusl and I have the intention to do so. But again, it's not something that you should have anxiety over or worry about, like, oh, did I have the intention to do the fard when I did the fard? It's not saying that. But having that presence of mind, having that one knowledge of knowing what's a fard and what's a sunnah, and having it clear in your mind, this part is a fard, this is a sunnah, is good, right? It's desirable, right? Allah is pleased when you do that. But it's not something that you should obsess over. Then it mentions a person who needs ghusl can use a tayammum in certain conditions, but as soon as the person comes to water, they must make a ghusl. And so now it's actually going into the section of a tayammum. So I'll stop there. And when we come back next week, we're going to talk about what to do in a situation where you need to make a ghusl, but you don't have any water, right? And, spoiler alert, you're going to make a tayammum. You're going to do the dry ablution, but we're going to talk about the specifics of the parameters of that, inshallah, next week. So we'll stop there and we'll open up the floor in case anybody has any additional questions, inshallah. Any questions? Bismillah. Yes, Bismillah. Brother Dawood.
Bismillah. Yes, today I'm trying to do the catch up. Well, what it is just FYI, some information I need from you. In 1978, that's when 78, 79, that's when I took my shahada. And when I learned how to make wudu, it was a thing of making a certain dua for each part of the body. What method was, you familiar with that?
Yes.
For example, what method was that part of? Because that was something that was given to me back then and I used it. But now, once I became part of the Maliki method, I know that I don't have to do that. But it was the thing, I still got brothers that call me up asking questions and, let them know that the fact that that's not required. Like I tend not, asking the law to don't write your deeds in your right hand or write your deeds in your good hands and your right arm. Those are things that we learn.
Right. So it really depends. I want to make sure I make a note of where we left off. So I don't know what the source of that particular dua is, but even in the Maliki madhab, you have the right, if you know one of the du'as from the sunnah, from the hadith, that the Prophet ﷺ is reported to have made while he's making wudu, you have the right to do it. You can do it in your heart, or if you're somewhere where you're not by the toilet, you can do it on your tongue. Sometimes the one that I'm familiar with is when we wash our hands, we say, oh Allah, please forgive us for the sins we committed with our hands. Wash our mouth, oh Allah, please bless us to taste your Jannah. Please bless us to smell your Jannah. Oh Allah, please bestow upon my face your light and guidance. This is good. And it comes from the different books of hadith. And you're right, there are certain traditions that certain madhahib tend to favor more than others. This one that I just said, I would be guessing. I don't know if it maybe comes from maybe the Maliki, maybe some of the Maliki scholars prefer it, or it might be Shafi, or it might even be Hanbali, because I'm learning just from spending time with other knowledgeable people. In the Hanbali madhab, they actually resemble us Malikis quite a bit with regard to salah, interestingly enough. But anyway, so I don't know exactly what madhab that comes from. It's not mandatory, but if a person wants to do it, it's okay. It's okay. It doesn't transgress the following of the madhab if they want to do that. But they should know where they get it from. They should know where they get it from. They should know, that it's something that comes from the sunnah. Inshallah.
Shukran jazalan.
Any other questions? Any other questions?
Assalamu alaikum. Now, we have this situation here in America where, like, if we're traveling, like on a bus or a train, or let's say we're out, during the day, you're not home and it's store time or asr, and maybe there's a bathroom and a restaurant, something like that.
Right.
How valid is it, or how sunnah or obligatory? I mean, how can we make wudu in these places and it still be considered? Oh, okay.
No, I'm listening.
Because sometimes you can't always use it. Sometimes you can't take your socks.
Right. You still there? Benita?
Sorry.
No.
My concern was, like, sometimes if you're in a public bathroom where they have like all the sinks together and you can't really put your feet up there.
Yeah.
But if you go into a store where they have just one private bathroom, sometimes with the sink and everything is in there, you could do that. So how do we handle something like that? Is wiping off over the shoes or socks?
Right. Excellent practical question. So a couple of things. First off, it's not obligatory for you to put your foot in the sink when you make wudu, right? I think the Hanafi, the people who follow the Hanafi madhab, are more keen on doing that. I'm not sure. I haven't studied any of the Hanafi books, but I noticed the people who come from countries where they predominantly follow the Hanafi madhab, a lot of times people will put their foot in the sink. So perhaps the madhab might teach that it's better for your foot to be submerged in water, but that's not obligatory, right? So if you just wet your hand and you wipe your hand over your foot, you use your hand to wipe your foot, and you wipe your whole foot, including your ankles. You can take your pinky and comb between your toes, right? But that's sufficient. You don't have to actually put your foot in the sink. And as you mentioned, sometimes you may be in a situation where it's very inconvenient to try to put your whole foot in the sink. So it's good to know that you don't have to do that, right? You don't have to do that.
You mean all this time I could have
I feel the same.
you doing this class.
I feel the same way.
It's deep because so much of our Islam, and this is not a bad thing, so much of our Islam comes from just learning from people, right? Person to person. And sometimes people say, oh, you got to study the class. But in reality, this is how most people learn their Islam. If you're from a majority Muslim country, you learn from your parents, right? And most people who live in majority Muslim countries, unless you live in a place like Cairo or one of these major cities, everybody pretty much does stuff the same way. So if you learned, your wudu from somebody from Bangladesh, where everybody practices the Hanafi madhab and they usually put their foot submerged in water, that's how you're going to learn how to make wudu. And that's good. That's a valid wudu. But when you learn academically, you find you don't have to do that, right? You can just put your hand, wet your hand and then use your hand to clean your foot. So that's the first thing that you can be comfortable knowing that that is sufficient for wudu. Inshallah.
Oh.
Number
Dr.
two,
Habib,
yes, sir.
but isn't masa good for 24 hours?
Yes. So that's the next point, right?
Yes.
Now, in terms of wiping, like so let's say you're in a situation where you have to take your shoe and your sock off and wash your foot, right? In that situation, even in a public bathroom, you take your sock off, you maybe try to position your shoe to where you can slip your foot in and out of it, and you just wipe over your foot. You don't have to put your foot in the sink. But as Hajj Dawood mentioned, you also have the option of making masah, where you wipe over your shoe, right? So you don't have to take your shoe off. And there's different opinions with regard to how you treat that. A lot of different opinions. Sheikh Amin's opinion, the opinion we learned from Sheikh Amin, is that if you wash your foot by making wudu and then you put the shoe on, for 24 hours, you can wipe over that shoe, right? Even if you take the shoe off, right? You can take your shoe off, put the shoe back on, wipe over your shoe when you make the wudu. Some of the scholars were a little bit more strict. Some of the scholars said, they treated the shoe like the khuf, like the leather sock. And they said, once you take it off, the wudu is not valid. So some of my teachers follow that opinion. So that's what I follow to be safe, right? If I put my shoe on, if I have wudu, I put my shoe on and I can wipe over my shoe, right? For the rest of that day, as long as I don't take the shoe off, right? And then if I take my shoe off, then I have to make wudu over my foot again before I can make masha or before I can use that wudu, right? But Sheikh Amin, taken from Dr. Dunya Rahmatullahi, the opinion he taught us is that even if you take your shoe off, as long as you wipe over your foot once every 24 hours, you can wipe over your shoe and the wudu is valid, right? Did I miss anything, Hajj Dawood?
No, that's the way we were taught.
Okay.
That's from Dr. Dunya.
Right. And then they also say that if you have socks, some say if your sock is very thick enough that the water, when the water touches it, your foot doesn't feel it, and thick enough that you could walk a short distance without the sock getting torn up, then you can treat your sock also like the khuf or the shoe, where you can wipe over it and make masha over it, right? And then I've even, it surprised me, but I recently even met a scholar who was very knowledgeable, who from what I was told, they treat the regular sock even the same way. So you have a lot of different opinions, but what I would advise is, you can stick with what we know from Sheikh Amin, or what I know from some of my teachers from Senegal is they'll wipe over the shoe, but if they take the shoe off, then it breaks the wudu, right? So those opinions you can be safe with, inshallah. Does that make life a little bit easier, inshallah?
Alhamdulillah, Rabbi Alameen, because I was originally doing the sock shoe thing, right? And I was like, oh no, that's not right. That's incomplete. It's the stuff of law. I gotta take this and put my water. Even at home, I'm home a lot. I work out of my office, so I'm like, okay. That's the only part I said, I gotta make wudu. Dang.
Right.
But now this is it. This is really much easier. But even going out about and having been able to take off your shoe is just so convenient, but just helps. You might not even be making, even if you're not making wudu, I mean you're making salat, you can do your zikr, you could do your, recite and feel so, clean and doing your, even if you're just doing zikr, you just feel better when you're in wudu. Mashallah.
That's right. Yep.
So alhamdulillah, thank you so much.
Yeah, since I did it for many years, and I got in Sheikh Amin's class, and it was a relief for me.
Yeah.
Believe me. Yeah. For real, I was taught the same way Dr. Habib said he was taught by the people in Senegal. And I used to take my every wudu, take my socks off, wash my feet, and I did it for countless years. And once I heard that Sheikh Amin got it from Dr. Dunya, who was a Mujtahid Imam, I could go with it. And Dr. Dunya just said one thing, that if you found that Imam Sharudi says something other than he said, then go with Imam Sharudi.
Yeah. Alhamdulillah, Imam Sayyidi, alhamdulillah. And even what I find, and I don't want to go too far into this because I don't want to confuse anybody, but I find that scholars have different opinions, but when you take their complete practice, they're usually very balanced and feasible. What do I mean by that? You might have a scholar who says, no, if you take your shoe off, it breaks your wudu, right? But that scholar might be of the opinion that you can treat your sock like a khuf. You follow what I'm saying? Like you normally don't find the knowledgeable people taking the hardest ruling across the board. They may take the stricter ruling here, but the easier ruling there, right? So if you find that, studying the fiqh isn't supposed to make your life harder. It really makes your life easier. So when you find people that, they're studying in a way where it seems like they're becoming like the spiritual athlete and everything is, they take the hardest way, that's actually not correct, right? Imam Malik, rahmatullahi, he was he said he felt if you had two valid opinions, he would take the one that was easiest for the people, right? And we know they say the Prophet Islam, the hadith, they say he said to Yasser wa la tu'assir. He said make things easy and don't make things difficult, right? So something to know. So inshallah ta'ala, we can make masha, right? Even if like the shuyukh in Senegal, if you take the opinion of, okay, wash over your foot, once you take your shoe off, it breaks your wudu, still you can know if I'm going to go on a trip, I make wudu over my foot, then I put my shoes on and I keep my shoes on. If I'm on a road trip, I don't take my shoes off so that when I go into the public bathroom, I can wipe over my shoe. When I make the salat, I make salat outside and I make it to where, on the road trip, I make it to where I don't have to take my shoes off, right? You can use this information to organize yourself in a way where you can do the thing that makes things easier for you rather than putting yourself in these very difficult decisions. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Excellent.
I mean, because I was just, when we left the Sheikh, and then I came home, I was on the train for like several hours. So I didn't make wudu because I said, I'm gonna have to catch all this up when I get home because of the feet thing. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And
I know exactly what you're
now,
saying. That's what the masha is, yeah.
Now I don't, I don't have to do that. I can just keep it moving, go back to my seat, turn in the direction of the kid because whenever the train stops, because they stop at certain places, and I get it done, or bus or whatever, car, wherever you're traveling, do that. So alhamdulillah.
Well, one thing I do have to say, and sister, please don't get mad at me because I just gave you something to make it easy for you. Now I don't want to not give you something to make it harder for you, but
Lord.
but in terms of praying while you're sitting down, like on the plane or the train, they say the fard salat, you want to stand up for the takbiratul ihram, right? So when you if you're making salatul dhuhr, you shouldn't make salatul dhuhr sitting down in the chair on the train unless you have a problem standing up in general. Like somebody in the wheelchair, they can pray sitting down. But for those of us who normally make the prayer standing up, you have to go to where you can actually stand up and face the qibla. But for sunnah prayers, you can make it sitting down. So if you're making salatul witr or some other nafila, some other sunnah prayer, you can make that sitting down. But for the fard, you should do it where you can stand up and make all the motions. So,
okay, thank you for that.
Alhamdulillah. I don't like giving people information to make life harder, but that is one that I have to share with you.
Well, that's better than not making salat, because I wasn't making salat at all. I was just holding it because that was just for the wudu, but I wouldn't have done it correctly. Now that you showed me, the best way, because that's not a problem to stand up if you can. If you can do it, you can stand up and then you can sit down right after that. After the initial takbir.
So it depends on the situation. If you generally do that, like if you say you in the masjid, if you would sit down in a chair because you have an issue with your legs, then you can do that. But if you usually do all the motions of the prayer, you stand up, you make sujood, then you need to do that when you make the fard prayer, right? So in a car, it's not so hard because you can just, when it's time at some point between the time for Dhuhr and Asr, you pull over somewhere, right? That's safe and that you have, security, especially if your sister, you want to maybe have people with you to make sure you're secure and you can pray, right? But on a train or plane, it's a little bit different. Like sometimes it's a little bit difficult because sometimes you don't have the option to actually get off the plane or get off the train. If you're traveling in the Muslim world, it becomes real easy because they usually make a space for you on the train or on the plane to pray, right? But here in the States, it's a little bit more difficult. So sometimes, you have to try to plan your trip out. This is one of the reasons why you can pray the Asr early, right? When you're traveling, or the Isha early, so you can pray your Dhuhr and Asr together before you get on the plane or the train. Or you can pray your Maghrib and Isha early before you get on the plane or the train. Follow me?
Yes.
Even if you're praying it before Asr comes in or before Isha comes in.
Exactly.
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah.
Mashallah. We'll go ahead and stop there for time's sake, but thank you. Those were some really good questions. Alhamdulillah. May Allah reward you. I'm sure a lot of people benefited from your question. That's the thing about questions. Usually, if you have a question, there's other people in the class that have the question too, right? Or who had the question and didn't even realize they had it. So may Allah reward you. Inshallah ta'ala, we will see you all next week. Jazakumullah khair. May Allah bless you all and reward you for coming to the class. May Allah bless us all with success in our efforts to learn this information, to share this information, and most importantly, implement this information and practice this information. May Allah bless us with success in that, with tawfiq in that, and forgive us for the times where we fall short in that. بجاه رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد الفاتح لما أغلق والخاتم لما سبق ناصر الحق والهادي إلى صراطك المستقيم وعلى آله حق قدره العظيم. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون والسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. جزاكم الله خير. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته everyone. We'll see you next week inshallah.
Wa alaikum salam.